much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, as always, our wonderful chairman, Mr. Royce, for the time. And, Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this bill, H.R. 1918, the Nicaraguan Investment Conditionality Act, also known as the NICA Act. And I want to thank Chairman Royce and Ranking Member Engel for working with my office to bring this important measure to the floor today. I also want to thank mi hermano, my legislative brother, Albio Ceres of New Jersey, who's the Democratic lead on this legislation, because his leadership on all things related to human rights is admirable, and his steadfast support for the people of Nicaragua has been unwavering. Thank you so much, Mr. Ceres. And I also want to thank the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee Chairman, Jeff Duncan. He's been helping us in leading the effort and bringing attention to the human rights abuses that are sadly occurring in Nicaragua. And this legislation, Mr. Speaker, is straightforward and it's simple. There have been a lot of exaggerations about what this bill does and what this bill doesn't do. Our bill is aimed at leveraging America's influence and conditioning our vote at any of the international financial institutions for Nicaragua until the leadership in that country takes significant steps to restore democratic order. I think that we would all agree, as members of the United States Congress, that to have democracies in our region is beneficial, and to have strong governance and strong rule of law and a strong independent judiciary. These are all values that we share, and that the people throughout the hemisphere would like to have that in their countries as well. So let's go over just briefly what are some of the conditions in this bill. And please, as I go through them, ask yourself, is that a damaging condition, or is that something that would help the people? Not whether it helps the ruling class, the rich guys, the fat cat bankers, not whether it helps the regime or the government in power, whether it helps the people of those countries. So let me go through the list, Mr. Speaker. This bill has as conditions to promote democracy. Promoting democracy, promoting an independent judicial system. Those are wonderful values. Promoting an independent electoral council so that the ruling party doesn't steal elections. Strengthen the rule of law so that you don't have corrupt judges deciding in favor of the rich guys and against the poor of the country. Fighting corruption, including investigating and persecuting government officials who are credibly alleged to be corrupt, who go against the people of Nicaragua, and further enrich those who wish to do damage to the country. What else does the bill do? Well, one of the conditions is that it protects the right of political opposition parties. Don't we want that? Political opposition parties, journalists who are trying to get the truth to the Nicaraguan people, just as they do here to the American people. Trade unionists, human rights defenders, and other civil rights advocates to operate without interference. Isn't that what we want for all countries to have? And these conditions, Mr. Speaker, they're not unheard of. In fact, they're similar to what this country has already passed, what this Congress has already passed for the Northern Triangle countries of Honduras, of Guatemala, and of El Salvador. And now we want to do that for Nicaragua. So it's intended to help the people of Nicaragua. And this bill has safeguards in place to ensure that humanitarian assistance continues to be provided to address basic human needs. Humanitarian assistance will continue. And some of those basic needs that we talked about, such as free and fair elections, they're not being met today due to the failed leadership in Nicaragua. And who does that help? Well, it helps the leaders and it hurts the people when you don't have free and fair elections. We want to help the people of Nicaragua. Now, reports have surfaced that the Nicaraguan Electoral Council is giving away identity cards so that minors, underage individuals, can be allowed to vote. Nicaraguans who are not on the electoral rolls are also being allowed to vote. What does that mean, Mr. Speaker? It means that there will be no way to determine if the individual voted more than once, and that's how the status quo wants it. The fat cats, they like it so that they can stay there and they can manipulate the results of the elections. And we're also seeing civil society leaders publicly expressing their concern regarding the deterioration of human rights in Nicaragua. As a result of speaking out against the government, they've been targeted for persecution. You speak out against the government, you're going to have some false charges thrown at you. And what about the indigenous communities? They've also expressed their concern regarding land grabs by the government. Violence is breaking out as the Nicaraguan military is being dispatched to squash the peaceful protests by these indigenous communities. So let us not forget, Mr. Speaker, just what kind of leadership structure we're dealing with in Nicaragua. The Russians have set up operations in Managua. They're proud of it. They put it on the front pages, and that poses a threat to U.S. national security interests. If the gentleman would yield me an additional...
I will yield the gentlelady an additional 2 minutes.
Gentlelady is recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the chairman. Nicaragua continues to offer its unconditional support to Nicolás Maduro and his dictatorial regime in Venezuela. And according to congressional testimony, Venezuela's entity, PDVSA, has also used its subsidiary in Nicaragua, which is called Albanisa, and I'll give the exact letters of those names, to launder money. So, Mr. Speaker, if Venezuela's Maduro is using Nicaragua in order to evade U.S. sanctions, we need to take a closer look at these ties. We need to hold people accountable because all of that hurts the people of Venezuela and the people of Nicaragua. It helps the government, but it doesn't help the people. And that is what this bill does. We want to hold the Nicaraguan government accountable, just like we've done in other countries. As I said, in Central America, this is not something new out of whole cloth that we've invented. It has worked, and it has truly helped the people. Now, earlier this year, Mr. Sirius and I, we traveled to Honduras, we traveled to Guatemala, and we saw firsthand how conditioning our support for these countries works and has been extremely effective. Has it hurt those countries? It has not. It has worked. It has strengthened their democracy. It has strengthened the rule of law, the independent judiciary. So placing conditions incentivizes country to do the right thing, and it makes institutional reforms as needed to improve the livelihood of their citizens. So I know that the Nicaraguan government does not like this bill, but I tell you, Mr. Speaker, the people of Nicaragua would like to know that the United States Congress stands with them as they call for reforms that promote democracy, that strengthen the rule of law, that fight corruption, and that protects the right of all political opposition parties. And that's exactly what this bill does. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you.